the mindfulness when you're warming up and you're buzzing a low C or whatever you do for a warm up that's familiar to you that relaxes you. You'll some days your brain's going to be racing about all these other thoughts and stuff you got to do, and you're not in the here and now. You're in the there and then, and not focused on where you're at. So it's to clear that noise out and just be there with just the playing of the instrument. Whatever else is going on, if you're doing a gig, it can wait.
This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Mark Zauss. Mark is back by popular demand for another hang. There are few people who can talk about the physical and mental demands of the modern trumpet player as authoritatively as Mark. His seemingly magical range and power made him a mainstay at Disney's Magic Kingdom with both FutureCore and the Main Street Philharmonic. But when you combine his battle-tested chops with his skills as a licensed clinical psychotherapist, you get the ultimate resource for your trumpet playing woes. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I have a return guest, yes, indeed, by popular demand. He's back, the one and only Mr. Mark Zauss. Mark, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I had a great time last time. Glad to be back. So.
Oh, man, I got so many great comments about your episode and the discussions that we had. And it also, I mean, it's great for me just to catch up with you because we have a lot of stuff in common in terms of the way we kind of approach life. So I think that's always good to have that foundation. So let's just kind of dive into things, man. You know, it's obviously it's been a crazy time since the last time we talked. You know, things of between COVID and then the resulting things that kind of happened because of that, and so many musicians were out of work during that period of time, and I know that you're doing the park gig for a while, and then you were, most of you had already kind of phased yourself out of that for a while, right? To get your practice going, your clinical practice going. But how have you seen, the results of people having to kind of switch gears from being more in the gig, gigging consistently to not gigging, and now gigs are back up again. So the shifts that occur in ourselves, both emotionally, mentally, and obviously then physically, as we go from working to not working back to working again.
That's a great topic to bring up because there's been pretty much a mental health tsunami. When you take somebody's pattern of life, what they do each day, their routine, and you change it around, it's really difficult on the brain and on the limbic system. The brain loves routine. It loves the same thing over and over again. Or it maybe not the same exact thing. It loves excitement too, but it likes to know what to expect, at least to know what's coming. And especially for musicians, they're used to going and doing gigs, driving to the gig, getting the gig, calling. It's their livelihood. So then that gets taken away. Because they're not able to work, it gets canceled, or there's no gatherings, or they can't work. Well, so it takes a toll on them. And there was a lot of talk wondering if it would come back, because when it started out, the pandemic was only supposed to be 2 weeks, and then it turned into, well, here we are in year 3 coming up. We're almost on about the anniversary of that. So yeah, it definitely took a toll on people. Did notice that some people that went out and started working again had a real increase in anxiety. They're shaking, they're doing stuff they didn't ever think they would, almost like they're confused, had difficulty functioning and even finding the gig. Their first day back, first week back, they're having some anxiety about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been back to work, thank goodness, gigging, and it was interesting at first, kind of being on stage and doing mostly events and things like that. So but what was really weird for me was just the other day I was at a concert, and it was like the first concert I've been to in a long time. And that now obviously the CDC has lifted the mask mandates, and I'm in this, but almost I would say a mosh pit. It wasn't that kind of a concert, but it was just a bunch of people standing by the front of the stage, and there were only a handful of people wearing masks, and I had mine, and I just felt really kind of weird standing there without one for a while, and it's like I feel a little security having the mask on actually. So, but yeah, it's real interesting to see how some people are still holding on to the caution. Some of it being very subconscious. It's that fear and anxiety of it, and then other people are just like, the hell with this, man, and they're just they're just way back into the old normal sort of thing. So. Yeah, I can see how from a performer's perspective that could be kind of a little shaky too. So with your practice, I mean, you have that combination of dealing with the general public, but then also people come to you for your expertise because they're musicians and they're having some level of struggle either as a trumpet player or in terms of the technical aspect, but also then the mental approach to things. So have you really seen kind of an uptick of problems that people are experiencing in terms of how their anxieties are affecting their technical performance?
Yes, I am. What I'm getting a lot is people are calling for a lesson in their auditioning. There's a couple of things I'm getting, and they're having horrible nerves. And I'm hearing this quite often where I didn't used to have nerves. I used to just go in these auditions. I loved them. I look forward to them. And now I'm shaking when I go in, and they're really getting to me. And there's ways to treat that. It's pre-anticipatory anxiety. And that also comes through in their playing. So they start tensing up before they play the instrument. And, it's hard to really do anything well when you're tense, whether it's martial arts, golf, or anything, any kind of sport. It's hard to do it when you're tense. So they almost have to relearn how not to be tense again. It makes sense. They haven't done it in a long time, and it kind of is new to them again. It's a familiar new, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what are some of the, I mean, obviously, this is this is advice. This is not, by any means, a clinical session, but, what are some of the standard kind of protocols that people might be able to look at to help to ease those levels of anxiety and to get themselves a little more calmed down, deregulate that amygdala, and, get themselves back on track again?
Well, good question. So I'll give a couple of examples of some things you can do to help calm down the limbic system or the fight or flight glands. So if we go back to the person who preceded Freud, which would be Margaret Mahler, she had an object relations theory that was pretty interesting, and she's obviously brilliant to come up with this. So we relate, our brain assimilates situations to other situations that we've seen. So if we previously, let's say we go back a couple thousand years and we went to a place where we found food, we would recognize the cues around the place where we found food before. It could be trees and bushes near a lake, and we found fish in the lake, in other words. So our brain would relate the objects around the lake to food, right? And we'd start to have a reaction, or we might salivate, we might feel that we're hungry, get excited because we know we're going to eat soon, if that makes sense. So it all comes back to playing trumpet too. So if we were tense and we were driving to a gig and we're thinking about what the other musicians might think or what the audience might think, we might grow some anxiety about that. So these external cues or these objects that we would relate to would cause us to be tense, and it's recognizing those. Where's this anxiety? Where's this tenseness coming from? And so part of it is awareness. You are aware that you're feeling anxious. The key to the beginning of treating any sort of anxiety is being aware of it. And as soon as you are aware of it, the cognitive behavioral approach would be to acknowledge it. Okay, I'm nervous about something, can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's because I'm on my way to a gig and I've done it well. Then you take a huge breath So if you're listening obviously you're listening to this if you're watching this, but if you would try this little experiment, let's say you take a huge breath and you release the air, and then see what kind of thoughts come in your head right after you release the air. So you go, so I don't know about you, but for the first 4 seconds or so, I think absolutely nothing. There's no thoughts in my head. That's because the oxygen dilutes the neurotransmitters in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the front part of the brain, where our executive decision-making center is from, is taking place. Where we make decisions, thoughts, and how we process our surroundings. That in turn calms down once we take a big breath like that and clear that out. It would send a message to the limbic system or our fight or flight glands, specifically the amygdala gland, which is the fight or flight gland, that everything's okay here, everything's good, we have plenty of oxygen, no reason to worry. And it starts to calm down the limbic system. And you notice that after you do that, or after we do a breathing exercise, let's say like a box breathing exercise, I'll show you in a minute, my speech will slow down, it'll be less spastic, and the fight or flight glands will calm down as well. So after you do the big breath like that, let's say you're on your way to an audition, you're sitting backstage, you're sitting outside of the audition room ready to go in, or you're about ready to perform, or any anxiety provoking situation that you might have. You would take that huge breath, release the air, then breathe in through the nose for 7 seconds. So this would be 777 is the exercise. It's called box breathing. You breathe in for 7 seconds through the nose, slowly, steady air. Hold your breath for 7 seconds, and I'll explain that in a minute. And you release the air through the mouth for 7 seconds, as if there were a handkerchief in front of you and you're blowing a pocket in it. Super steady air. Then you rest for 7 seconds, and then you repeat the same thing again. So you're looking at about 49 seconds. So it doesn't take that long to do. It's pretty practical. And it starts to calm down the limbic system and clear out the junk that's going on in the brain, the shoulds and oughts. I should be doing this. I ought to have this nailed. I'm afraid I'm going to mess up. It starts to slow down all those thoughts. When that happens, the limbic system gets the signal to relax and does not trigger the adrenal glands that sit right on top of the kidneys. It doesn't trigger those glands, a big more adrenaline, more norepinephrine, more stuff that makes us nervous. It starts to calm it down.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite exercises, and what I find kind of funny though is that for people who rely on mastery of their breath as trumpet players, that most of us have very limited understanding of how the breath affects the mechanism of the brain and the body. So, we should actually be positioned in many ways to have the most Zen kind of lifestyle because of the way we breathe, or should be breathing in terms of technique. But I think that box breathing is one of those techniques that is, it's like a Swiss Army knife, if you will, yeah, for a trumpet player, because it does help to calm us down and to focus us, but then also that practice of the way the breath works to also strengthen our breathing mechanism, the physical breathing mechanism, and which is going to help us to become better players as well. So it's like a win-win.
Yeah, it is, and it conditions it's operant conditioning the other way. It teaches us how to relax when we play. So let's say you're playing trumpet, right? And let me see if I can get this. And your air isn't steady. Well, how do you know if your air is steady? You buzz the mouthpiece first. The trumpet is just the amplifier, as you know. And if your air is all over the place, you keep buzzing until it becomes steady. So I haven't played in an hour. So you can hear a great deal of unsteadiness. So I'm going to try this again, but I'm going to play as soft as I can, try to close up that aperture. Okay, and you can see there's about a 50% improvement where the air is much more steady. So every time before I play, I have to make sure my air is steady, my shoulders are down, I'm relaxed. And when I say close aperture, I don't mean make it as small as you can. I just make it efficient is what I'm trying to say. You know, it's going to be different for everybody, but I'm trying to get all the particles of lip I can to vibrate in sync. And you can establish that by, you know, getting the steady air first with just a mouthpiece. Then, you know, when you put the amplifier up, it's already steady.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the best solutions are generally the simplest.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk like elegant solutions, we want to make things so daggone complicated. But there is a level of complication. Obviously, if you break down any process that goes on in the body, the amount of neurons that have to fire, the amount of muscles that have to either engage or relax, all these things that to make a simple action, it's so complicated. But really, then it becomes as simple as you just have to have clarity of thought and clarity of purpose. And when you do that and kind of get out of the way, then it works. So, that idea of turning the intention into the breath, and the breath then is going to create the vibration, and the vibration is going to be amplified by the trumpet, and voila, there we have it. But unfortunately, something goes amiss between the thought and the action. So, like from your perspective, both from both sides of the horn, if you will, from the physical, mechanical, musical portion, and then also understanding the clinical side of things. Where do we typically see a breakdown? I mean, where do we go astray most commonly?
It would be patience, meaning when, and this is also basic, and it's so basic it gets overlooked. Let's say you get a Arbin book, and this is one example. The book is written in such a way where you start in the top left corner, you play down to the bottom right part of the page, and it implies that you play, if you have in order to build endurance, you have to play the whole page through, and then if you can play it all the way to the end, and you've built endurance. So when you do that, you notice you get tired and the air starts getting unsteady. So what are you really practicing? You're practicing how to get better at being tired and better at having unsteady air. You're reinforcing those. And so what I learned is practicing something in a smaller increments. So it would be played a first established steady air with buzzing the mouthpiece or breathing and getting the shoulders relaxed. And then playing the first line, you rest as long as you play. Then you buzz the mouthpiece again, get steady air, play the next line, and rest as long as you play. And you're focusing on steady air above all else. So you're focusing on the Zen type air, if you will. And once it starts, in being aware of when it starts tensing up, then you have to relax the shoulders and keep them down. The other part is being aware of the thoughts that you have. So the breakdown that I see mostly, and this is players in symphony, jazz bands, lead trumpet players, and even on different instruments, is you're focused on getting the sound out and playing it perfectly, and not on the process of playing. So the process of playing would entail doing the maintenance, the basic thing. You have to be relaxed before you play. Tiger Woods, when he plays golf, is going to be in his most relaxed state in order to play the best he can play. He's not going to go out there and be as tense as he can. A boxer that's boxing, if he tenses his muscles up the entire time he's boxing, he's going to get fatigued from isometric pressure. So he won't be able to have any endurance. Same thing on trumpet and French horn and somewhat on trombone. So I'm seeing a lot of players that come in and their face is rubbery, or it hurts, or they. I was just talking to a fellow that I had him feel the pressure points in his cheekbone, and he went, "Oh my God, that hurts." So he had been playing in such a way where he fatigued his face by playing for a long period of time loudly, and it caused some fatigue in his face. So he had to figure that out, get the lactic acid out of the tissue there, and then practice softly to kind of retrain the brain that you don't need to play that loud.
Yeah, that, the concept of embouchure fatigue, that's become a real prevalent thing that I've seen a lot on different social media platforms, some of the different trumpet groups that are out there. And seeing a lot of people ask about that. And I don't know whether it's just, it's something that is becoming more prevalent, or it's just that people are becoming more open about talking about it. But yeah, it just seems like a lot of people are dealing with that. And like you said, there's the too much pressure, there's the overblowing, trying to play too loud, too high, too much, all these different things. And a lot of those things do come back to that idea that you talk about of patience. So, if you're dealing with fatigue, I know that that macho side of us as trumpet players, and especially if you're a lead trumpet player, it's to muscle through and to man up and suck it up and just keep pushing through. But that's kind of what we really need to do is somewhat counterintuitive, because we actually do need to lean back a little bit more. We need to relax a little bit more. So what's one of the ways that you personally process that, when you feel like you're getting a little too intense, how do you manage to get yourself back into the more relaxed and balanced state of playing?
That's a great question. So every set I would do at Disney was loud, fast, high, right? So I'd tense up every set. Now you'd think that I have this knowledge of how not to play tense. You think I wouldn't tense up? Nope. It's going to go right back to the same thing I always did, and I'll get the same result I always got. So I had to change that pattern in that loop, and I still do. So before I play, it's the natural tendency to play trumpet, especially lead trumpet, is to muscle through and play loud and get the sound out, right? So before I would play a set, I'd play this is something I learned from Wynton Marsalis when he was giving a trumpet clinic, and I was in the audience like with a bunch of other people just listening. So he would play a low C as soft as he could and hold it out and just focus on steady air, rest, then do a B, as soft as he could, hold it out, B flat, and then A flat, G, and then as low as the trumpet can naturally go on a F sharp or G flat. And I would hold each note out as long as I could, and then I'd go do the set. And it would teach my brain that I need to focus on the relaxed feeling when I play the set rather than getting ready to tense up. I know that the natural state is to tense up, so I have to show the brain and the body that and I know your natural state is to tense up, but I want you to do it this way instead. And it worked. It kicked in there.
Yeah, that's a cool one. I have to try that. I know for myself, one of the things that I found is that like if I'm practicing at home and I'm doing my warm up and I do my maintenance and I do this and do that, do technical studies. Then if I go to start playing some charts, and practicing music for an upcoming gig, a lot of times I feel myself tense up and things start to choke off. And if I put the horn down for one, walk away. But I found that if I just sat down and I put on some play along tracks, like some Abersalt tracks, and just played jazz for 2 or 3 tunes, just blowing choruses and just not really worried about what I'm doing, just playing and kind of getting my mind more into that relaxed state. Then when I go back to do the hard practice, it's like everything is just locked in. It's just the aperture is open enough that I get a good sound, but it's controlled enough that I have access to my upper register. And it's like the stuff that I couldn't play 20 minutes ago suddenly is just coming out without any effort. So the kind of that resetting of the mechanism seems to be like one of those tools that I think that every great player has. Some of them don't know what they're doing, but they have these little things that they do that kind of get them reset so that they can function at a high level. So, I really appreciate you expressing some of these ideas. So like, from your experience, both, again, as a professional player and as a clinical practitioner, what if there was like a canon of Mark Zauss's most important points for making your physical, mental concept of playing work the best, what would some of the top tips be?
Well, first, that explanation you just gave was perfect. That was absolutely wonderful. That's exactly right on. So if you're watching this, please rewind and listen to that again. That was right on the money. So the tips, if I could put them in a shorter summary, a practical summary, would be the first step is the awareness. Now, when you're practicing, your face is going to get fatigued, and you do grow and gain endurance by playing something for a long period of time and getting through it. What I'm saying is you want to do that. You can do that. It's okay to get fatigued. It's just to not have a bad habit while you're doing it. It's to be relaxed and focused while you're doing it. If you feel some fatigue there, well, that's okay. If it's fatigue here and you can feel your teeth, well, then it's time to rest. So when you're playing, there's going to be a buildup of lactic acid that takes place in the face. It's important to get that out of there as fast as you can when you're done practicing. It naturally dissipates as soon as we get done playing, but it's okay to do that or whatever you need to do to get it out there. Kind of feel around here, make sure there's no pressure points. That's the one thing to watch that. And the main thing that I got off there a little bit, the main thing is to set yourself up before you play. You want to show your brain and your body how to play relaxed before you play each time, so it knows what to do. It's kind of like waking up every day saying, well, this is what I got to do today. You have a plan. So it's showing the body how to do it, whether it's the breathing exercises, the long tones. I'm a big fan of James Stamp. I've done that since 1983, and that's really what helps me. And I don't do the lip buzzing. I just do the mouthpiece buzzing, and I rest as long as I play, and I focus on steady air. And if it's not steady, I get it as steady as I can before I continue on. So that's probably the most important thing I could share, I think.
Yeah. Well, with breathing seems to be one of those things that, you ask 10 trumpet players to explain how the breath mechanism works in playing, and you're going to probably get 15 different answers. Some people are exceptionally creative with those answers. But like when I was teaching martial arts full time, the understanding that the breath is the link between, in Chinese concepts, is like the breath is the link between your intention and your energy and your action. So those have to work together. And that's particularly the link between your thought, the way you're thinking, and the way you're breathing. That you can tell if someone is nervous by their breath. You can tell if they're relaxed. You can tell if they're anything that's going on. It immediately creates a change in the breath on that subconscious level. And then when you understand that you can consciously change it, I call that the breath hack. When you hack into the SNS or the PNS. That you can consciously direct that and affect your mental state, which therefore affects your physical state. But when you talk about breathing, sometimes people, it's like you have to tank up. Well, what does it mean to tank up? Or you have to, breathe from your diaphragm, or you breathe, all these different kind of things. And for me, I've always felt like it's more important to think about the quality of your breath than the quantity of your breath. So when you're breathing, how do you think about your breath? Because the way you think about it is going to be, obviously different than the way anybody else thinks about it, since, we're all individuals. But, how do you think about your breath? Are you thinking in terms of volume? Are you thinking about the terms of the quality of your breath? Are you thinking rhythmically? So how do you think about the mechanism of breath, and then how do you apply that to your inherent playing?
It's a great question, and this is another one of those points where you need to go back and listen to what he just said again. If you're watching this, that was perfect about the relationship between the breath and You nailed it. So with the breath, it's like learning how to drive a stick shift. So when you first are driving a stick shift, you have to draw a diagram of the gear, 1, 2, and you're grinding, you can't get the clutch right. It's all over the place. And how that relates to my breath is I learned the complete yoga breath from Bobby Shu. I never took lessons from him, but from his illustration that he wrote out, and then somebody showing me what that was. It took a lesson from him. I don't even recall. I think it was Mark Wood that showed me that. He's a trumpet player in the Army Blues. He's phenomenal. He's a super nice guy too. In the first way I did it, when I was learning, it was very mechanical, unusable. So it was, and then you relax the shoulders. And I have so much air in me right now that I can't do anything, is what it felt like, right? And that's not what Bobby Shu intended. I'm sure that's not the way he plays. But to get to understanding of how it worked, that's how I was breathing. So I tried to play like that for a while, and I'll just close everything up. I couldn't play. So I think what he's more getting at in a practical way would be the way Pavarotti, or Luciano Pavarotti, or Frank Sinatra would breathe. They're both on stage and they don't look tense at all. So this goes back to Maggio, which is and play. That's it. You open your throat up and you play. And that seems to take the tongue and put it back where it's supposed to be, wherever that is. I don't know. For any person, I can't see in there, and for me to guess to where your tongue exactly it should be would be like trying to tell you to slow down your liver function. There's no way you can't really consciously do that. You just know it's in the right spot. So it's to take and then play. And I stopped doing that basic thing when I was doing a orchestra gig at Disney, and I was missing notes. I was like, what's wrong with me? So I drove all the way across town, took a lesson from like 45 minutes away from a trumpet player named John Almeida that lives in this area. He's a brilliant teacher. And he said, oh yeah, you're not breathing right. Just, and so I did that and everything went back into place. And he says, okay, let's get some coffee. And that was the end of the lesson. That's all I drove all the way across town for him to tell me that. And he was right, So
yeah. Like I said, sometimes the best answer is the simplest one. So.
Yeah, it's just, and then you focus on what you were saying earlier, steady air, and this trumpet starts to feel like an extension of yourself when you're playing instead of a cold piece of metal. So,
yeah, and I think the relationship that we have with the instrument is, obviously it is very intimate. But sometimes I think it becomes adversarial, and it's not the fault of the trumpet. I mean, the trumpet's a trumpet, it's an inanimate object, but it's that, that mindset that we have when we pick it up, or, when we have specific kinds of playing situations that we're in, that, we suddenly find ourselves, freaking out. So I used to have a lot of problems with stage fright, and I finally kind of got it under control. But in talking with a lot of people about that, I would say things like, whether it was in music or martial arts or other aspects of life, I would say, can you do this skill at home, or in your practice room, or in your shower, or or whatever? And they're like, yeah, I can do that. Well, then what's the difference between doing it in your practice room, in your jammies, and doing it on stage? And like, well, there are all these people. Like, well, that really doesn't change anything. I mean, it changes your perception. It changes what you're focusing on. But if you have the ability to do this, and you can do this, then the only thing that's changed is that you've allowed your external circumstances, your external environment, to then be in control of your facilities, as opposed to you being in control of them. And it's like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. So, and I think tying that back to the breath, I think then that breath and those kind of exercises that you were talking about, like doing the square breathing, those are those things that we could do on stage, or, it doesn't take that much time to do that reset when we start to find our minds being drawn out of being focused on the task at hand. and being drawn into either the fear or the anxiety of what's going to happen next, what's the audience going to think. So I think that's kind of a good jumping off point. But are there any other kind of things that you can think of that, when you start to hit that wall, that little performance anxiety, some triggers that you can maybe create for yourself to recenter, rebalance?
Yeah, you're right on what you're saying. Obviously, so the trigger is identifying the trigger. So which would be there's people around. And it's just it's reminding yourself I'm no different now than I was in the house, except for there's people around. So there's a couple ways to decrease the anxiety. One is the knowledge of why you're having this anxiety. So let's say you watch a terror movie. I think we talked about this in the other interview that we had. Let's say you're watching, I'm going to use the reference of Psycho, which gives away my age a little bit. So, that everybody's seen it. So the shower scene, eek, eek. So how come we get sweaty, nervous, scared, anxious when we're watching it on a television or in a theater? Well, on a television nowadays, but it's because our brain can't tell if we're in the movie or we're watching it. So the amygdala, the fight or flight glands, can't tell if it's the difference between reality and perceived reality. So when we're playing in front of an audience, some part of our brain thinks we're in danger, that something's going to happen. And so it literally, some part of our brain wonders if we're going to be attacked or not. So it feels threatened and it starts to react. And so that knowledge of that, saying, oh, this is just my limbic system overreacting because it thinks I'm in danger. So that gives an explanation why. It takes away some of the shame from yourself. Shame's the big one. If I was any good, I wouldn't be nervous. Well, yeah, everybody gets nervous. I've seen Arturo get nervous. It didn't change the way he played, but he's nevertheless, he still played the hell out of it. But then he wasn't nervous. So it changes your perception, and then you follow that with, you acknowledge it, and then the reason you're nervous, so it's probably because there's people around. You don't have to nail it or get it perfect, and you take the breath and start to release that, and it teaches the limbic system that you don't have to be nervous. Nervousness is not required to be able to do this task you're going to do. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. From one of the things that helped me was learning to reframe the sensations that I had. So I would get nervous. So my heart rate would go up, start to feel change the body temperature, tunnel vision a little bit, all the classic signs of fear and anxiety. But it's when I can't remember where I read it first, and it was talking about how the sensations of fear and in anxiety and the sensations of excitement and anticipation are fundamentally the same. And It's like, oh, so if I think about it and go, well, how do I feel if I'm really excited and anticipating something? Like, the example I use a lot of times is like, you're coming downstairs this Christmas morning and you're a kid and you've got all these packages and you don't know what's in any of them, and your heart's racing and you're all excited, and you feel your breath has changed, everything has changed. And it's like, well, that's kind of the same feeling that you have when you're feeling like you're getting ready to go on stage. Now, the difference is, one, you're framing positively and you're thinking about what you're going to possibly get. And the other one, you're framing it negatively and you're afraid of what you're going to potentially lose. So it's like, oh, well, if every time I have that feeling, if I reframe that as, this is excitement, this is anticipation, this is my body preparing me not to be in fear, but it's preparing me to actually perform at my higher level. So if the limbic system is kicking in, well, this is just preparing me with the adrenaline to be able to perform at a much higher level than if I was, in my default mode network and just kind of kick back and chilling out. So it was that kind of reframing that allowed me to take the situation and then go, okay, well, I'm in control of this now. And, to me, that's been like a big, that's an eye opener for me, and one that I like to share with people as much as possible. But like the reframing concept, do you have any kind of particular way that you help people to look at, like, let's say someone with the pre-anticipatory anxiety, how would you help somebody to reframe their situation so that they're not falling into that trap?
That example you just gave is phenomenal. That's a great way to look at it. That would be an excellent example of a reframe right there. This is my body preparing me to get to play. That's a great way to look at that. So I would use that one, if you don't mind me stealing that from you. And that's brilliant. And also the basic part of it is the reframe is excellent, but the reframe could be acknowledge, process. It's the reframe would be trust the process. This is a natural process. This anxiety is a natural process. It's not a bad or evil one. This is a natural process that is instilled in human beings because of the way we're brought up to survive, to find food and to eat. And it's just my limbic system working the way it's supposed to try to protect me from something it thinks is going to attack me. And it's just preparing me to get ready. How can I take this energy and use it towards the performance? So if we're too excited and we're too into it and, wow, this is great, then it'll affect our performance and it'll diminish it some. So it's not up here or down here, but it's in the middle, right? Same in martial arts. If you're so excited, when you're in a match, you might not. Now, my expertise isn't up to your standard or level in martial arts, but I would assume that you might not function as well. The next thing you know, you're looking at the ceiling. So
you're looking at something.
Yeah. Floor. Yeah. So yeah. So it's not letting you get too high or too low. It's just keeping it in the middle. In what I love what you said about, I'm in control of this. Because you are. You're not powerless over anything. You are in control of that. So.
Yeah, I was reading a book recently, and I can't remember which one it was, and I can't remember the baseball player that you're talking about, but it was a story about a really high level professional baseball player, played for the Dodgers, had a phenomenal season, but he hit a slump and he couldn't get out of it, and the process that he used to get out of it and like have this amazing like record-setting game, and I think it was in the World Series in the playoffs, was he said that he just realized he had to just go back to the methods and not think about the result of I've got to get a home run or I've got to do this or I've got to do that. It's just go through the process. So he's trained that process of how his stance is, how he swings, the mechanics of his swing. And he said that, once he kind of got his mind out of, I've got to perform, to, I just need to go through the process, then that's when the performance actually enhanced. So it's like the kind of, stop trying to do it and, be Yoda, just do. But I think it's setting up, that's the key of like any person who's great at anything, particularly in a physical endeavor, they have a process that they go through. They have some sort of methodology. And some of it may be ritual, some of it may be, superstition. But in a way, I think they all serve the purpose of getting you into the right mindset and creating the proper framework for you to be able to perform consistently at a high level. So, if someone will come to you and say, hey, Mark, I have all these tools, I can do this, but I can't seem to do it consistently. Do you have any suggestions on how to create a framework to create a process that will help to develop a level of consistency and comfort so that you can perform at a higher level?
Absolutely. So what you described was familiarity too. The brain likes this. What we first started out talking about with the COVID thing. The brain loves familiarity. It loves something it can recognize and hold on to. It loves the same thing each day. It loves to know what to expect. and that reduces anxiety. Tells the part of the brain that you're going to get food today. You're not going to starve to death today. Basically, is what it's saying. So if you warm up the same way every day, and you warm up in the same way, or I just said that, warm up with the same thing each day in the same way, which reminds the brain about the basics. Because as a brass player playing lead trumpet, it's easy to forget about the basics because it's so easy just to turn into muscle the note out or will it out or whatever, that it's easy to get into a strenuous habit, right? So if you focus on, I'm going to remind my brain how to relax before I play. I'm going to teach it how to be calm before I play, and then I'm ready, And the mindfulness, when you're warming up and you're buzzing a low C or whatever it is you do for a warm up that's familiar to you, that relaxes you, some days your brain's going to be racing about all these other thoughts and stuff you got to do, and you're not in the here and now. You're in the there and then, and not focused on where you're at. So it's to clear that noise out and just be there with just the playing of the instrument. Whatever else is going on, if you're doing a gig, it can wait, most of the time, unless it's something critical. It can wait until after you're done. And then you set yourself up you teach your brain and body how to be relaxed. You set yourself up for more consistent performance.
That's good. I mean, I've heard so much about, like, for warm-ups, so many different concepts about the mechanics of the warm-up. Some people that say, well, you want to have a longer, more gentle warm-up. Some people are like, just jump in it. Some people are, just do a couple breaths, and if you're breathing, then you're warmed up. So everybody's kind of got these different things, and the people, whatever one they are preaching, for lack of a better word, tends to work for them. But I think, like, the key for me from what you said there is just the level of consistency, the familiarity. So whether it's a 2-minute warm up or a 2-hour warm up, if it's consistent, then we have that familiarity, and so our brains are more relaxed and more comfortable with the process, and that's going to allow us to perform at a higher level. So I definitely like that one. That's golden stuff. But if we talked about the mechanical side of things, for yourself, are you more of a low, soft, and slow warmer upper, medium volume, or you just dive right into the tough stuff?
I do the buzzing, getting the note with steady air first with a mouthpiece, and then the stamp buzzing, da, and I'm listening for the air to be steady, and then I do the next part of the stamp, and it's absolutely no feeling whatsoever in it. I'm just doing this solely for to get the. I'm not trying to connect with the instrument so much or anything. I'm just trying to solely get the air, to total cognitive behavioral, trying to get the air to show it how to be steady, so that when I play, everything stays like that, and it never does. And I have to redo it again, have to do those long tones we talked about earlier before we play. So it's, after doing it since '83, it's become quite mechanical. It's just a familiar thing, and it becomes so mechanical sometimes that I forget to relax. I'm just getting through it, so I have to still be mindful of having it. I'm focusing on what I'm doing, but I sometimes I grew to the point where I didn't think I could play without doing that stamp routine until I had to do it, and I could. It worked fine. I was tense and kind of tight for a few tunes, and then it felt like it did before. So you're not stuck on anything. It's just it goes better when you. It seems to go better for me when I do this warm up. That's the same, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be stamp. It can be anything that like you just said. There's some guys that don't ever play pedal tones at all, and they sound phenomenal. They can read anything. Their range is huge sound. They do a different warm up. So whatever they're doing, they need to keep doing that.
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot of truth to that. So let me ask you this, because I've talked to some people that have known you from the early years, like the high school years and things like that.
Really?
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I remember listening to Mark playing in the marching band, and he was a monster back then. Um, but even for people who had a particular skill set when they were younger, like I recently had Peter Bond on the show, and Peter was talking about being the high note jockey, playing with Phantom Regiment, back in his earlier years, and kind of making this transition into the orchestral playing. And a lot of the things he was able to do when he was younger was just kind of I guess the young dumb luck, sort of thing. And you could do it, but you didn't quite know how or why, and so you ran into some limitations because of it wasn't actually a learned process. It was just something you kind of stumbled into, and then eventually when you have problems, you have to figure out how the hell to make it work consistently. So even though you had those crazy high chops at a younger age. When were you able to kind of put everything together to a point where you felt like you were truly in command, consciously? You knew what you were doing. You knew how you needed to approach things, and then that also then leads into being able to share that wisdom with other people. So, kind of like, when did it come together, and what maybe catalyzed or crystallized your approach to playing?
Well, that's a great question. You're right. The first few years, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I could kind of get these notes out, and I was doing them with horrible form, and they came out. Most of the time they came out, I had limits. There was some natural range, but I didn't know what I was doing. And a couple things happened. I had my teacher was Cy Pryweller. He's in South Florida. And he showed me the stamp in Crusoe. And I did that for a summer. I did exactly what he said. I didn't do it correctly because I was a stupid kid and didn't listen to him as much as I should have. He said, rest as long as you play. And I didn't do that on the stamp thing. So it didn't go as well as it could have. Had I listened to him, I would have got farther along. But anyway, that increased the power and the range. That helped. And then in 85, I got a hernia from playing. I was leaning forward when I played instead of breathing correctly and leaning back. So I did not tell me to do that. I was away from him. I went to college and did that, and tore the tissue in my ribs after the hernia healed, and I couldn't play for a while. So I had to figure some stuff out if I was going to go back to playing again. So I actually worked at UPS for a while and delivered packages because I didn't know how long this was going to take to heal. Did a lot of weightlifting, healed that up. Then learned that power and strength is not just like in martial arts. It helps, but it isn't gonna. Somebody with more skill, half your size, is gonna take you out. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with form and your understanding of the form and your skill that you developed, right? So right around the time I was in later part of Future Core, I was working at a Dixieland club, and I had let my credit card get up to back then it was like $18,000, $20,000, right? That was a lot of money back then. So I'm looking at it going, what am I doing? So I worked at Future Core during the day, and then this Dixieland club at night called Rosie O'Grady's. And Rosie's was much harder than Future Core. It was a beating, and you get home, you felt like hamburger. So in order to pay off this debt, which I did, and pretty quickly too, I had to work from like 8:30 in the morning, start warming up at 7:30, and then play till about midnight for a while. And if I didn't, somebody else would, and I wouldn't get the check. Basically, is it. They don't care. They just need somebody to play the part. If I didn't do it, you're out. So I did those. I had to figure out the method. I began to figure out the method of relaxing, and that's when I started doing those long tones in between each set at Future Core. And again, after that shift ended, I went out to Rosie's and played the Dixieland show. It was about I think it was 4 1-hour shows or 50-minute shows or something like that. I can't really remember. And that's when I had to figure it out, because you had to figure it out, or I wouldn't be able to play, or I would lose my ability to play because I would get embouchure fatigue syndrome. I didn't know what it was back then, but I knew I'd get tired and stiff and wouldn't be able to play. So
yeah,
it's pretty.
Well, that's brutal, and Dixieland gigs are brutal. Yeah, yeah, because you're just constantly playing. There's just there is no break. So
circus, the two guys on either side of me were like phenomenal. I was just getting my butt kicked. I loved it. So
yeah, well, that's a good situation to be in, as long as you survive it. So, but you were like when you were saying about figuring it out. I mean, I think a lot of times, it's one of the things I talk to people about is that change is inevitable. As Heraclitus said, the only constant in life is change. But we can either change by default or change by design. So you change by default when you don't have any choice but to change. You're failing at the gig, so you got to figure out how to be successful at the gig. Whereas change by design is the proactive change. So change by default is reactive. Change by design is proactive. And I think that a lot of times, we kind of, especially younger players, and I don't necessarily mean chronological age, but level of maturity. So I would say, more mature players have figured out that you have to be on somewhat of a constant search for better, more efficient ways to do whatever it is that you're doing, because youth and stupidity will only take you so far. And you become more proactive in your change because you're anticipating future needs as opposed to just reacting to the current environment. So in terms of like your continuing search for new knowledge and new skills and new methods, what are some of the sources that you look to help to make Mark Zauss a better player and a better teacher?
Well, that's a great, I know I keep saying that, you really are asking some great questions. And I learned a lot from the students and from the people that I give therapy to. So I had a teacher where I went to college said, go to school on your clients or your patients. And so they're saying things to me like, I'm doing the Crusoe range builder, the seconds only every other day, and my range went up. Okay, oh, that's good. That's great. Another guy says it, and a third person says it. I'm going, okay, I need to try this. And they're right, and I don't know why, and I don't understand. Maybe it's just this small sample size that is better than that, but I get data from it. So it's another thing to try. There's a lot of experimenting going on because there's no empirical testing done with 3,000 people or whatever in a double-blind study or even a correlational that much, so you get ideas from people and you test them. They're like hypothesis ideas, and you test them to see if they're relevant. So you can present that to somebody. Here's something to try, because this is always just a practice, right? To see if it'll work. In every person, everything doesn't work. It works on a certain population of it. So that's what I learned. There's no dichotomous or good or bad way to do something. There's just different ways. So it's taking everything in and experimenting with it and seeing what really works the best.
That's a great approach. Well, since we last talked, I've added a few segments to the show, and I want to have you join on these new segments because I think your answer is going to be really, really enlightening, as all things that you tend to do are. But the first segment is brought to us by a good friend, Michael Barkley at Barkley Microphones, and it's called Sound Off. And Sound Off, I want to talk with you briefly about your approach to developing that beautiful trumpet sound. So what are some of the things that you look to and you suggest to people if they want to improve the quality of their sound?
You practice softly. So you buzz on the mouthpiece, get the air steady softly, and you practice softly, and it takes the aperture, puts it where it's supposed to be. So the most particle of that you can possibly have to vibrate inside the cup is vibrating. So you have efficiency, and it makes it sound nicer. But if that air isn't steady first, then the sound never really gets to where it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. That's a real kind of physical answer, more so. And the non-physical is to listen to somebody you want to sound like, and your brain will figure out how to sound like them. So.
Well, I guess I should stop listening to my cat screaming, because that's what I think. All right. Our next segment is brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces. Venture, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect, and this is called Geared Up. If you use the code Trumpet Gurus 21 on your next order from Venture, you will get 10% off. So Geared Up is about gear, but particularly your concepts surrounding gear. So why you play what you play, and what people, the suggestions that you would have for people if they're looking to kind of up their gear game. What are the concepts that they should have, other than the fact that this is what Mark Zauss plays, and it make you sound exactly like him, because that's the horn I want to buy.
Well, great. So like the other thing we talked kind of touched on, everybody needs something different, So when I went to Terry Warburton, I got this Warburton mouthpiece, and I said to him, I've known him since '83. I've known him forever. Like 82, I think it was. And so I have a pretty good rapport with him. And I just said, this is what I want. I just want something a little bit. He goes, I got it. And then he ran off, and I was afraid to say anything to him, because I might screw up his idea. And he came back, and he nailed it. It was perfect for me, right? That means it's perfect for me, for the shape of my teeth, how they overlap in the little tiny area that I have here. So if I give that to Arturo, it'd be horrible for him. His face is big. He's a big guy. He needs a big mouthpiece, that works for him. So you get somebody with the understanding of what, like the mouthpiece company you just mentioned, they'll figure it out. You tell them what you want, and they'll help you. Well, I think this would be good for you. And again, you experiment and find out, but they're just going to make the experimenting cut the time down to less. The bore size of the trumpet I use, I need something really open. And so I have a 468 bore. It's a Schilke X4, and it has a brilliant bell. And it makes a lot of noise. It's a loud instrument, and that's good for what I do. But if I'm in a section with a bunch of guys, like when I played with the Jacksonville Symphony a couple of years ago, they made those trumpet players in there had some of the most beautiful sounds I ever heard in my life. It was incredible. I could have listened to them all day. It was beautiful. And so I really had to work hard to blend with them, because they had larger equipment and different equipment. So if I were to play with them on a full-time thing, then I would have to switch around what I do. Probably brilliant bell wouldn't be a good idea. So they don't need a saw in their section, So it depends what you're doing too. So.
Yeah, well, I hear you on that, because my trumpet is made by Terry, and it's a titanium bell, and it's perfect for what I do, which is higher, faster, louder, playing playing in gig bands, but it would certainly not cut it in a chamber orchestra.
Yeah,
because you do you are called on to do different kind of gigs from time to time. Do you switch equipment at all? I know you said you would if you were playing with the symphony more, but I mean, like in general with them, do you have like a 2 mouthpiece setup, or a second horn that you would use if you needed to?
No, I don't. I use 1 mouthpiece and 1 trumpet. But if I were doing something, I'm only doing one thing. I'm playing with my own band, and I'm playing only the style that I do. And so that's all I need it for. But if I was playing something else, like in an orchestra, I would absolutely have 2 mouthpieces or 3, and then a couple different trumpets. I would have more equipment. So.
Yeah. When you were playing, like when you were doing the Future Core and the Dixie band, were you playing the same gear on both of those sets?
Well, the future core, I had to use this bugle that they made for us, and it was the DEG bugles. They were good. It was a strange looking thing. They did the best they could, and then still a good instrument. And then this guy Lawler made a custom horn, and you could get air through it. It just was funky because it's a bugle. There's no way you can make the thing function correctly. It's what it is, but I use the trumpet at night, but it messes with your pitch a little bit. The bugle that I had messed with my pitch. My G's and A's just above the staff are incredibly sharp all the time, and still are. I'm still fighting that. So,
well, the price we pay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the final segment we have is brought to us by Robinson's Remedies, which is Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Round. And I think that we did this one with you originally. So I came up with a whole new set. These are fresh off the press questions for you, my friend. So this is a series of questions all over the board, different aspects of life, music, and we're going to see how Mr. Mark Zauss does with this new updated version of the Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Round. Are you ready, Mark?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. First question. What is the one thing that you've always wanted to do but haven't?
Oh, boy. Probably play with Maynard Ferguson,
Okay.
Yep.
If you could master any instrument besides the trumpet, what would it be?
Probably a piano.
Okay. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you want to live?
Oh boy, I don't even know. Good question. I don't. Tennessee, I guess. Part of Tennessee.
Okay. All right. That's all right. I lived in Tennessee for a while. I'm happy to not be there anymore.
Yeah. I don't know because I never lived there.
What's your favorite dessert?
It's Boston cream pie. So
that's a winner. What is the one question that you wish you never had to answer again?
What is jazz? That's easy. God.
All right, what's the one question that you would love to answer, but nobody ever asked you?
What level of importance does the trumpet have in my life? Basically,
Right, so what's the answer to that question?
Not much. Not very important. Used to be, but you move on and it's not so important anymore. So.
All right. If there was one thing that you could change about the world of music, what would it be?
It used to be closer to this back in the day, that there'd be more awareness about the different styles of music of jazz. Wynton is trying to do this with everything he's got, and so is the Lincoln Center Orchestra. They're trying to spread the word out, and so were a lot of people to do that. I can think of a bunch of people that are trying to do that I can't remember their names right now, but I would try to spread the awareness of these wonderful styles that are out there that people don't know about.
All right, cool. All right, if there's one thing you could change about the world as a whole, what would it be?
Well, that we're all related to one another. We're about 99.99% the same. So we're all brothers and sisters, and it's to realize that. So when you're trying to screw someone over, it's just doing it to yourself. It makes no sense. We're all in the same boat. We need to help each other. So.
Very true. All right. What is your superpower?
Oh, I don't think I have one. But,
we all have our own unique thing that makes us special.
I had some insight. I guess I could use that. I've been insight into things that can figure some things out. So,
what's your kryptonite?
It would be lack of coffee. There was no coffee in the world. That'd be it.
Superpowers are gone. All right.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
Mm-hmm. Who's your favorite vocalist?
My wife, probably. My wife.
Good answer. Safe answer.
Yeah. No, she's
she is a great vocalist. Yeah, absolutely. What is your vision of the perfect gig?
It would be 30 minutes long, and it would be playing only, and I could hear everything. In other words, I could hear myself play. You know how you're in some room, you can't hear anything. And it would be playing songs that I can play well, all the songs that I play well. So I don't, and then the gig would end and I'd leave.
And pick up that $1 million check on the way
Yeah,
out.
that's right.
All right. And what is your vision of the perfect life?
Well, if I were wealthy, but not so I could keep the money and buy a boat or something that I don't need, it would be so I could help somebody else with it. And I think it would give me such joy that I wouldn't be able to stand it. If I could do something for somebody else, I could make a difference in their life, with that money. And you don't have to have it. You can't take it with you when you die, but it sure comes in handy here. And if you can help somebody with it, it's a great thing. So.
That's awesome. Well, you have certainly helped me, and I'm sure that everyone who's tuned into this, you've helped them. There's some tremendous truth bombs and nuggets of wisdom in this episode. So I will steal your line and say, go back, rewind this, listen to it again and again and again, because there's just some great stuff in here that will help you, and not only in your playing, because these are all universal principles. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Mark. You're a tremendous player, and just such a great guy, and so knowledgeable on so many things, and just so willing and ready to help. And I highly recommend, if you have questions about your playing, some things, particularly if you're dealing with issues like your onward fatigue, you're having some fear and stage fright, anxieties, things like that, check Mark out, because he does some great lessons virtually, can help you through those problems. So links for his website are in the show notes. So just make sure you check it out and stay in touch with this man. He's got a lot to share. So thank you for spending time with us today on the Trumpet Gurus Hang. As always, make sure that you like, subscribe, share, send us checks, money orders, credit card numbers. We'll take all of those things. You can Venmo us. I think we're all set up for that too. So we do appreciate you, and want to bring more of these kind of shows where we can really dive deep into some of these higher level concepts of playing, things more than just, how to play double high C's and that sort of stuff that is typically the kind of questions that people ask of great players. But we want to get into the real nitty gritty here. So if you have any suggestions for questions or future guests, please make sure you hit me up at the trumpetgurus@gmail.com. And so until next time, folks, remember, it's peace and slide grease, and we're out.
Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors, and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.